Imagine a punishment so terrible that even the most prepared, those with special training and psychological resilience, quickly crumble. We are talking about a technique that touches on the deepest human instinct: survival. Discover the cruelest punishment ever invented and why it breaks even the strongest. The idea seems simple: a piece of cloth, water, and complete control over the victim's breathing. But the execution is cruel. When the cloth is placed over the face and water begins to pour, what happens is not only physical but also psychological. The water soaks through the fabric, blocking the nose and mouth. The human body, desperate for air, does what seems to be the only solution: try to breathe. But what enters is not oxygen. It is water. The feeling of drowning is instantaneous and inescapable, causing intense choking and even the urge to vomit. In this moment of desperation, the victim feels control slipping away. The mind panics and the primal instinct for survival manifests itself in an overwhelming way. Each second seems like an eternity, while the air is lacking and consciousness oscillates between fighting and surrendering to the inevitable. Simulated drowning touches on the depths of human vulnerability, revealing how fragile we can be in the face of invented cruelty. And the situation is even more desperate because the victim, with the cloth over his face soaked in water, enters a state of extreme agony. The feeling of suffocation is overwhelming, while despair takes over the mind and body. Each attempt to breathe results in more liquid being inhaled, further worsening the torment. The inability to expel the water generates unimaginable anguish, transforming the simple and essential act of breathing into a true nightmare. Even the most prepared and trained are pushed to the limit, confronting the fragility of human existence in the face of this cruel form of torture. Even agents trained in resistance techniques face immense difficulty in maintaining rationality when faced with simulated drowning. Despite all the psychological and physical preparation, the sensation of extreme suffocation triggers a visceral terror that transcends any training. Control over breathing, one of the most basic human instincts, is suddenly subdued by the water that invades the nose and mouth, creating overwhelming anguish. The mind, accustomed to dealing with stressful situations, is thrown into an abyss of despair, while the body reacts violently to the lack of air. In this horrifying scenario, the fine line between resistance and surrender is blurred, exposing the fragility of existence in the face of the terror imposed by simulated drowning. Even the most resilient succumb to the unimaginable agony of this cruel method, demonstrating how the survival instinct can be easily manipulated when faced with such a primal and terrifying threat. In this stage of simulated drowning, the victim reaches a borderline state between consciousness and unconsciousness. Physical and psychological suffering reaches its peak, while the feeling of uncontrollable terror consumes the mind and body. Each moment becomes an internal battle between the desperate desire to survive and the exhaustion caused by the lack of genuine air. The line between reality and nightmare dissolves, leaving only the primal reflex to fight for one's life. Desperation intensifies as the soaked cloth continues to obstruct any chance of adequate breathing, pushing the victim to the brink of total collapse. Even the most resilient individuals are pushed to the absolute limit of physical and emotional endurance, revealing the cruel effectiveness of this torturous method in breaking even the strongest. In this final stage of simulated drowning, the victim reaches a point of extreme physical and emotional exhaustion. Despair and agony intertwine, forming a suffocating web that envelops the mind and body. Each short, desperate breath is like an arrow piercing the soul, while the fight for survival becomes a whirlwind of indescribable sensations. The feeling of being on the brink of imminent death hangs in the soggy air, suffocating any shred of hope. Even the most lucid thoughts are obscured by a fog of uncontrollable fear, transforming the environment into a dantesque and disturbing scene. The victim, submerged in the anguish of simulated drowning, faces his deepest fears and his most intimate weaknesses. The dilemma of resisting until the last breath, or succumbing to the seductive call of surrender, becomes an endless cycle of psychological torment. It is at this crucial moment that true human nature is put to the test, revealing the dark depths of the human condition when confronted with the boundless cruelty of waterboarding. Subscribe to the channel for more shocking historical curiosities. Stay until the end to discover how this practice has been debated throughout history and the lessons we can learn about ethics, power, and the limits of what we are capable of doing to each other.